Now our next speaker is a little more accustomed to the media spotlight and quite well known to us on our television screens these days. David Shoebridge began as a cellarman and superintendent for the Royal Agricultural Society, but soon moved on to become an associate to Family Court Justice Eric Baker. He's been a Greens member of the New South Wales Upper House since 2010, and his portfolio responsibilities include forestry, industrial relations, planning and heritage, firearms, justice and local government, and these equip him well to understand and comment with knowledge and conviction on the planning issues that concern us here tonight. So please welcome David Shoebridge.
Well, thanks very much for the welcome for the city, and also for your sort of utopia vision of Newcastle. You took a big chunk of my speech there, I've got to say. I think it's absolutely wonderful to be here in Newcastle, in a town hall that's actually being used for what town halls should be used for, discussing the future of your city and what role you as residents and community members can and should have in shaping the future of your city. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land and acknowledge the Awabakal and Worimi people. This land, like all of our state, and in fact all of our continent, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And I hope the new council, whatever its political stripes, comes into office with an open heart to talk to our First Peoples, and maybe Newcastle can lead the way with a nice local treaty with your First Peoples here. That would be a fine start to your next council. So, I was kind of hoping to inspire you about what good government can do. And I know you're starting from a pretty low base here in Newcastle. I was hoping to inspire you on why you need a strong and independent and community-minded council. Because from my view, I'm a local government spokesperson for the Greens, and part of my history that Felicity didn't talk about was I spent 8 long but enjoyable years on my local council, working at a local government level and seeing what you can achieve if you have your community behind you, not always behind you, but largely behind you. If you have a council that is collaborative and working together, and I work with a lot of Liberals, I've got to say, on Malara Council, as you've probably gathered. But independence too. And I reckon you can achieve a huge amount, provided your council and your community are actually working together and talking to each other. But in Newcastle, I've got to say, when I look back at the last decade or so, and I particularly think from 2012 till now, I think you can look back and wonder what has gone wrong in the second biggest city in the state that has made its residents feel, many of you, that politics is hopeless, that your council is part of the problem, not part of the solution, that state government just wants to do a job on you. So, I think that should say how Newcastle got here. But in any event, how did you get to the situation where you had a local council, you had a mayor, a property developer mayor, that actively pushed to shut down the rail line into the centre of the second biggest city in the state? I mean, what went so hopelessly wrong with our electoral system that somehow or another a property developer mayor managed to get enough votes to become Lord Mayor? How did we lose faith in local government to such a degree that happened? Because what happened after that was just bloody predictable, wasn't it? You elect a property developer to mayor, and they shut down your railway line to open up a major development opportunity right through the middle. ICAC then comes in and the whole thing bloody unravels. I mean, you could have actually written that out in advance, couldn't you, from 2012? But how did we get to the point where the community felt so disenfranchised with the ordinary functioning of council that they thought they'd chance their arm with a property developer as mayor? I mean, that's a pretty low place, isn't it, for local government and for a sense of democratic engagement. And then how is it that your state government treated you like some sort of, second-class citizens, where they would basically experiment on you and see how arrogant they could be with Newcastle and the Hunter more broadly, and how many bad ideas they could impose upon you until you went into revolt. You know, it takes a pretty out-of-touch state government to decide that the best interests of Newcastle can be mediated through the eyes of a property developer mayor, and it takes a pretty bizarre view of government to think that in the 21st century, when pretty much every other major city is looking at how they can build new rail lines, including Sydney, that they think the answer to Newcastle is to shut down your rail line. That is pretty extraordinary low level of governance in 2014. But you only got there because you had a council that surrendered to the state government. And then on those key planning issues about the centre of your city, it wasn't your council, and I think there are some honourable exceptions on your council. There are some terrific councillors, I think, who have really fought. But as a general rule, there hasn't been a majority on council that's really engaged and fought the state government to protect your heritage. I mean, who was it that ultimately challenged the state government to get the building height down on the GPT towers and the like to protect at least some of the vista of your heritage? Well, it was a bunch of residents and residents groups who were demanding these changes and holding the state government to account and actually taking on. Your council was just rolling over and having their belly tickled by the state government and not doing what they should have been doing, which is getting out there, talking to you, understanding your concerns, and then from day one, courageously advocating for them. From day one, courageously advocating for them. And you could say the same about all of those planning decisions that are still ongoing in the centre of your city. And on the light rail, imagine if you had a council that from the outset, when the government said they actually want to not put light rail on the transport corridor, but they want to repeat the mistakes that have happened in Sydney and run it right down your major thoroughfare, regardless of the traffic and the business and the other transport concerns about it, and had realised what nonsense it was from State 1 and just said, no, it won't happen in our city. And joined with the rest of you and said, we actually have a vision. We've got our transport guys on this. We've got our vision. We're not going to let you do this to our city. We actually want a light rail system that's going to work for us if you're going to do that. And imagine on the supercars. Imagine on the supercars if you had a council that when the government first floated the idea of getting rid of a problem from Homebush and imposing it on Newcastle, imagine if you had a council that at that point, from the outset, said, we're not going to be signing anything. We're going to be doing everything in our power, politically and legally, to not allow you to do this to our city. Because we have an extraordinary amount of heritage that we prize in our city. And we have a vision for Newcastle that's a little bit bigger than 24 hours or 48 hours of hyped up petrol-driven cars running around our city as though that's the answer for the 21st century of Newcastle. But imagine if from day one, instead of being sucked in by the state government and lacking the courage to actually point out the stupidity of it, imagine if they'd said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to sign that. That's nuts. You know, these photos that we're cycling through of all of the damage that is happening to your city and the failure to create that alternative vision, protecting the heritage, sustainable, engaging development, building a city you want to live in and hand to your grandkids. Imagine how different things could have been if you'd had that council that you deserve, that was listening to you and far-sighted and engaged and talking to each other and you as though you were on the same team. Imagine how different Newcastle would look now. So what I want to say to you is imagine you're going to get that council elected on the 9th of September because it's in your collective hands to elect that council. It's in your collective hands to have the Lord Mayor at the front of one of these rallies.
Where is she?
It's in your... I won't answer that. It's in your collective hands to reject that style of politics. That style on that. You know, the 2012 to 2014 style that you had. 2011 to 2014 style that you had. It's in your collective hands to care enough about the place you live to talk to your neighbours, to engage yourself. As I know, I look around here and I see people super engaged with their community that I've worked with on many, many projects in this city. You know? And I know that's the future that you all want, and it's the council that you all want, but I want to say, you can achieve it. You can achieve it. Because despite all of that mess, there are so many essential decisions your council is going to have to face over the next 3 years. It's only a 3-year term. Your council survived forced amalgamations. Newcastle did. But you know what? In one of the most bizarre twists of political fate, you were saved by the mayor of Port Stephens from being amalgamated. I mean, heavens help us. when it's the mayor of Port Stephens who rides in on a white charger and saves Newcastle Council, something is deeply wrong in this city hall. I mean, who would have ever thought that salvation lay over there? I wouldn't have. And the new council is over the next 3 years going to be engaging with an aggressive and arrogant and out-of-touch state government that if you do it right, you can actually win against. I've been part of a statewide campaign for all of the local councils who did have the ticket to fight, and every single one that fought the state government on amalgamations won, and they said we never could do it. And we did it with every single council that fought, with every single community that got their council to fight. Every one of them that had the ticket to go to court won their day and protected their community from an arrogant state government. Imagine your council doing the same on supercars and light rail and the future of planning in the city. And imagine them doing it lockstep with you. I'm really excited about what your council can do. And I want to say, if you ever doubt that a local council which engages with their communities can make a real difference to your city, come and visit Sydney and look at what Clover Moore can do. She's not one to step back and say, well, whatever Barry O'Farrell or Mike Baird or Gladys Berejiklian and say, she'd just sign on them. She's never done that. She's got an alternate vision for the city of Sydney. I think it could be a little greener and a little more socially progressive, but by and large, the city of Sydney is one of the best governments anywhere in the country. And she's courageous, and she's brave, and she's independent. She's got a vision about bike paths, and she's got a vision about zero net council emissions by 2020. She's got a vision about greening and building the canopy and building urban forests. She has a vision about ensuring that each individual neighbourhood gets close attention from the council. They build a city of villages where the people who live in a local area actually not only get consulted on what the local environment plan should look like, but their views actually feature in the local environment plan that the council eventually makes. Imagine that. Imagine consultation that actually produced an outcome rather than just a cup of tea, a biscuit, a pat on the head and being sent around and the original decision will be stamped. I actually love Newcastle. I love Newcastle so much that I was down in Wollongong earlier this morning and being interviewed about a hideous overdevelopment on a headland at Austinmere, and I was pointing out, and the north of Wollongong is gorgeous. You know, there's a lovely escarpment and things. And I said to the different news outlets there, I said, you know, this is one of the most beautiful parts of the state. You know, this escarpment and this little lace string of beaches and headlands. I said, this is what makes Newcastle such a special place. That went down really well. But you know, that northern part of Wollongong is absolutely magical. But Newcastle is magical too. Newcastle is magical too. And your heritage in the east, your deep Aboriginal history that you have here, deep Aboriginal history. The beaches and the cliffs and the natural and beautiful assets like King Edward Park and others. This is one of the most beautiful parts of the state to live in. And it's a big enough city that you can set your own destiny. And your council is big enough, with enough resources, that you can stand up to the state government. And your collective wisdom that I see in this room can guide your council over the next 3, 7, 16 years. But you need to keep engaged. And what Corinne is saying about building those community resources is so essential. Yeah, by all means, engage between now and the 9th of September and try and elect the right mob. But whoever you elect, you need to hold to account throughout the entirety of their council term. Throughout the entirety of their council term. You know, I think you've had some terrific individual councillors. And I'm going to be boldly political now and say I think Therese Doyle has been an extraordinary But imagine if you had 10 of them working together, talking with you, listening to you, feeding your views into how your council operates. You can take back your city. You can absolutely stare down an arrogant state government, because no state government is stronger than a united community. And Newcastle, our second biggest city, with its extraordinary history of struggle, trade union struggle, environmental struggle, urban struggle, this place has an amazing, amazing future, but only if you insist upon it, and only if you stay engaged. I want to come back here in October and celebrate with you your wonderful new council. I want to come back here and stare down the state government on their next array of stupid plans they have for your state, for your city. I want to keep representing you as best I can in the New South Wales Parliament. But mostly I like coming to Newcastle because I love talking with you, and I know most of us share the same vision. We just need to make it a reality. Thanks very much.